Hey kids, welcome to part two of a four-part series on verbs and the digital SAT. If you guys haven't checked out part one, go ahead and do so before watching this video. Part one provides an excellent and a very necessary, in my opinion, overview of all of the sort of general broad things that you need to know about verbs. So for example, what are the different ways that verbs are tested on the SAT? How do you work through a question, right, that tests you on verbs? There's a very sort of organized and systematic way to think through these things, and that first video presents you guys with all of that. And in each of the following subsequent videos, right, so videos two, which is this one, part two, parts three and part four, in each of the following videos, we're going to take a more granular look, right, at this broad concept called verbs. So we'll break down each way that the SAT can test you on verbs and provide you guys with all of the foundational knowledge and the best sort of tips, tools, and strategies that I use personally and I've taught to thousands of students, right, to really help them boost their scores. So if you're really having trouble with verbs, if you really lack confidence and that feeling of certainty, if you feel lost or feel stuck, right, every time you get a verb question, these videos will help you guys out tremendously. I look forward to seeing you guys in the lab. Hey, welcome to the lab. So I just want to remind you guys that even though I do have a general structure and a framework for the things I talk about and how I want to progress throughout this video, I don't have anything scripted or written it down. This is exactly how I kind of speak in classrooms or when I'm working with students one-on-one. And I've been pretty successful at helping students to increase their confidence, their skills and abilities, and their scores by speaking to them in this way. So my hypothesis is that by speaking to you guys in this way in these videos, it'll really help you out as well. Also, you guys, just a little housekeeping. Please be patient and understanding with me. So sometimes my explanations will be kind of drawn out. It'll be long. Part of that is sometimes I get kind of lost when I'm explaining or talking about things. And so I apologize for that in advance. Another reason that I do this is I'm just really trying to take everything that I know about this concept and share it with you guys. I don't want to hold anything back, right, from you. And so I know that, like, I truly know as a teacher who's worked with over 7,000 kids, I know that some things that I say will be important to some of you, right? And other things that I say won't be important to you, but it may be important to someone else, right? So please be patient and understanding of that, right? You're not the only one, right, who's listening to this. My ultimate goal is to just try to help you guys make some progress in terms of your understanding, your skill, and your ability with this concept. And if I can just help one person feel more confident, feel like they're learning, feel like and can actually see results and improvement, then I feel like my mission or my job is complete, right? Is successful. But I am trying to do this to help the masses. So just wanted to give you guys a heads up on that. Also, guys, I don't have the nicest writing and the slides aren't designed. The production isn't as, perfect and as beautiful as I know it could be. Um, and I think part of that is like I do want to make these really engaging, but I know that it's just going to take way too much of my time to write a script, to design these each slide, and to produce these videos in such a Netflix type of way. I just can't. I don't have the capacity or the time to do that. And I also know that those things aren't as important as the content that you learn. Learning is the single most important thing. And so that's where I'm concentrating all of my efforts on, is by teaching you guys the knowledge and the tools that you need to know to learn this stuff, not just at a basic level, but at a mastery level. Okay, so in this video, you guys, I'll talk about the first way that the SAT tests you on verbs, which is a concept called subject-verb agreement. I'll share with you guys all the foundational knowledge you need to know about the English language as it relates to verbs, specifically subject-verb agreement, and I'll also share with you guys some basic knowledge about the test, about the SAT itself, and how they present these questions to you. I'll also provide you guys with some top test-taking tips and strategies and tools that can really help you guys go from feeling stuck and unsure to feeling unstoppable and really confident and certain when dealing with subject verb agreement questions. Okay, so if you guys don't know, my name is Jin Bei, but you guys can just call me Jin Teacher or Jin Sem. Sem is just a sort of colloquial and kind of a casual way of saying teacher in Korean. It sounds kind of cool to me, and I like to kind of stay cool. So you guys can call me Jin Sem if you guys want. Just as long as you guys don't call me Mr. Jin or Jin Sir. The first name is reserved for my dad, right, Mister. And the second name just makes me feel really, really old, and I don't like to feel old. So please don't make me feel old. Guys, I am a top 1% scorer in the verbal sections of the SAT, the ACT, and the GMAT exam. I have over 14 years of experience working in one of the most academically competitive cities in the world, which is Seoul, South Korea. If you guys, I know a lot of you guys are Korean or are familiar with Korean culture and geography. I worked in Apgujeong and Daechidong, which are the two districts that are considered to be like the meccas of hagwons or like private academies. So it's extremely competitive, and there's just thousands and thousands and thousands of students that line these streets up, right? Like pretty much all the time, right? All day after 3 p.m., because that's when a lot of these private academies, private institutions kind of start their education. Um, I've also been blessed and just really humbled to be recognized as a top test prep instructor for the majority of my career. I'm also an author and a content creator. I have a couple of books with the Korean publishing company that's going to be released, one by the end of this year and one probably early next year. And I've literally created thousands of practice questions for the SAT and the ACT. These questions were created based on my observations, my analysis, my studying for, my taking, my preparing, my teaching this stuff, right? Not just for myself, but to thousands of students, right? During my time as an instructor out there. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about, you guys, is this. My my goal. This is what I consider to be the single most important thing. This is my why. This is my mission. This is the thing that supersedes all other things. So I don't care about anything else other than this, right? I don't care if you guys like me. I don't care if you guys think that I'm funny or nice or mean or weird or strange. I really don't care about any of that stuff, right? Because my main focus is to help you miss fewer than 5 questions consistently. The key word is consistently, which I define as like 5 tests in a row. So my goal for every single student that I interact with in a classroom and now in the digital space, which means you guys, is to help you guys miss fewer than 5 questions wrong, to get fewer than 5 questions wrong consistently on the verbal sections of the SAT. This is a goal that I'm committed to doing and that I'm really interested in seeing if I can do by providing free videos to you guys daily on this channel. One thing that I do know is that achieving this goal requires work on your end, right? Like I promise you guys, everything that I teach you works. You just have to figure out how to work it for your situation, for yourself. Okay. And so it does take some work and some proactivity and even some honesty on your end, right? You have to really honestly look at where you are and what you know and don't know. And you're going to have to start doing things, right, to really help you advance your knowledge and make progress. Um, yeah, this goal is, I make this goal to be fewer than 5 questions versus an actual score number, like a 700 or a 730 or a 750. And the reason that I do make this goal to get fewer than 5 questions consistently is because I found this to be the most reliable indicator of you getting a top score on a test. So I've experimented with, thousands of students where in some semesters I'd have the goals to like do your best, right? The goal to get like, a 750, right? To goal to get like a 780 at least, right? But that wasn't as consistent. And the reason that it's not as consistent as creating a goal like this is because, depending on the level of difficulty of that test, a 700 score might mean that you get 10 wrong, or it might mean that you get, you know, 5 wrong, right? Like as a hypothetical example. What I mean is, if a test is harder, if one particular test is harder than another, right, the harder exam is going to be curved more generously. So which means that you can miss more questions, right, and get the same score on it compared to like an easier test. Okay, so because there's inconsistency, right, and there's just too much of a score fluctuation and a score range gap that I don't like, I have the goal set for fewer than 5 questions. If you're getting fewer than 5 questions wrong time and time again, you guys, most of my students who are able to do this, right, 5 tests in a row, 6 tests in a row, right, they'll see scores in the 99th percentile on the actual test, right? Maybe anywhere between like the 96th and the 99th percentile. So it is really the most consistent and reliable indicator of how you'll perform on the actual test, okay? Plus, if you're getting fewer than 5 wrong, like you can feel really, really confident and good that you're doing everything that you can. I don't want you guys to aim for a perfect score, because that's just putting too much pressure on you. And students who have, made their goals to get a perfect score, they end up scoring lower than they do on these practice tests because of that sort of pressure to get every single thing correct, right? And so it's too unrealistic, and it hurts you more than it helps you. So fewer than 5 questions wrong kind of gives you some wiggle room, right? It allows you to kind of miss, a few questions and know that you're getting it wrong and not feel bad about it, because you can still score in the top 99th percentile, right, by getting a few questions wrong, right, on the reading section and the writing section of the SHT. Okay, so with that being said, you guys, let's go ahead and jump in to the lesson. So this first part of the lesson, I want to talk about foundational knowledge about the English language, more specifically about grammar and verbs, right? More specifically about the concept of subject-verb agreements. So if you think about the concept of verbs, it's the word verbs, it's a very sort of broad and general concept, right? You can have specific topics underneath that general concept of a verb. So for example, you can talk about verb tenses as a specific subtype of verbs, right? Also talk about like singular or plural verbs, right? You can talk about verb forms, right? You can talk about verbs and sentence structure, right? So there's specific categories of that general category of verbs. And so the subject verb agreement concept, right, is just one specific type of that larger concept, right, called verbs. And so the first thing that you should know about this concept, subject verb agreement, is its definition. So subject verb agreement is pretty straightforward and simple. All it really means is that singular verbs must take on a singular subject, right? And plural verbs must take on plural subjects. Okay, so here's a couple of grammar concepts that I'm throwing out already that I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with already, but these words like singular and plural and subject and verb. So to provide you with a thorough understanding of these grammar concepts, let's talk about this a little bit. So guys, singular, the word singular just refers to one, right? Refers to one. Could be like one, it's not more than one, right? Plural, on the other hand, refers to more than one. So when we talk about it in the context of a singular subject and a plural subject, we have to look at that a little bit differently than when we talk about it from a singular verb and a plural verb, okay? Because they're going to be formed or written differently, right? So if we have a subject, you guys, is basically just any noun, right? And a noun is defined as a person, place, thing, event, an idea, like a concept. Um, so when we have singular subjects, they look different than when we have plural subjects, right? So generally speaking, you guys, to make a plural subject, we just add an s, right, to the end of the noun, right? For what's called regular subjects, regular nouns. So for example, if the singular subject is boy, then the plural subject is going to be boys, right? If I have kid, right, kids. A book, books, right? School, schools. Okay, so usually when you add the s to the end of a subject or a noun, it becomes plural. Okay, this is what's called for regular verbs, right? But we also have, I'm sorry, regular subjects or regular nouns. But we also have what's called irregular nouns, right? So irregular nouns, these guys don't behave as well as regular nouns do. So irregular nouns and could be something like, if we have the noun child, right? Child. To turn, so a child is a singular subject, right? A child. But to turn this into a plural subject, we don't just add an s, right? We wouldn't say a child's, right? But we would say children. Okay? So even though children doesn't have an s to it, we would consider this to be a plural subject because it refers to more than one person, right? Children refers to two children or three or 10 or 20, right? And there's other sort of nouns that take on this irregular sort of structure. Words like man, right? Person, right? Man goes to men, not mans. Person goes to people, right? And so on and so forth. Okay. So it's just being able to identify what a singular and plural subject looks like is important, right? And then now when we have a singular, so now if we're able to identify whether the subject is singular or plural, right, now we can move on to making sure that our verb kind of matches or agrees in number with our subject, right? So if I have a singular subject here, the boy, we'll just use these simple examples. By the way, examples that are simple are great, right? The reason why I make my examples so basic is to really help you guys to understand the concept, right? So don't mind the simplicity of the example. It's done on purpose and very, very intentionally to help you guys out. So if I say the boy, then now I have to have a singular verb, right? So here's the thing, you guys. The boy is a singular subject, right? And notice how the singular subject doesn't have the s at the end of it, right? At the end of the subject. But now the verb here looks, this is a singular verb. Right? Looks happy. Right? But notice how when we have singular verbs, right, we have an s usually, right? When we're using the present tense, right, singular verbs have an s to it, right? So the boy looks happy. He looks happy, right? She looks happy. Um, the student looks happy. So singular subjects don't take on an s to it, but singular verbs do, right? On the other hand, if I have a plural subject like the children, then now I have to have a plural verb, right? So look, the children look happy. Right, so now notice that the plural verb, right, it doesn't have the s to it, right? So that's a little bit interesting, and I know sometimes students get confused whether they should add the s, to make a singular. Like you have to keep track of, right? When you add an s to a subject, does that make it singular or plural? And the same with when you add an s to a verb, does that make that singular or plural? Yeah, so you have to keep track of that, okay? Sometimes students will get confused or mixed up between the two. So they'll put like an s at the end of a subject, and then think that that's singular, or they might put an s at the end of a verb and think that it's plural, right? And it's not the case. So make sure that you keep track of that. That's the first and most basic thing that you need to know. So uh, so like I said, you guys, the concept of subject-verb agreement is a very simple and straightforward one. But one of the ways that the SAT makes this concept a little bit more challenging for you is by placing the subject far away from the verb, right? So in order to find out whether this verb should be singular or plural, right, you have to be able to identify the subject. Well, the SAT knows this, right? And so they will make it harder for you, right, by putting all of this additional information stuff, these extra words, to separate or to make the subject farther away from the verb, right? Just to make it harder to identify. Now, how the SAT does this is they do this by adding in what are called modifiers and non-essential information. When you see non-essential information between a subject and a verb, you're going to always see two commas, right? One comma to open or to begin the non-essential, and another comma at the end of the non-essential to close or to finish it. Okay, it's a common place to put non-essential information between the subject and the verb, right? But that just adds an extra layer of information, right, that stands in the way of you finding the subject, right, of that verb. And same thing with modifiers as well. Because I know that these are kind of fancier grammatical terms, and that's okay. I do kind of use a lot of grammar language, right, when I'm explaining terminology, and that's important. Don't worry if you don't know everything so perfectly yet. I usually try to explain a grammar term, especially one that I know students aren't as familiar with. I usually try to explain it at a pretty basic and simple level for you guys. And when I don't, it's also kind of intentional. So don't worry if I don't, but I usually try to explain is all. The thing is with these terms, you guys, like modifiers and non-essential information, you just want to think about this as just extra information. It's just additional information stuff. Because the purpose of modifiers and the purpose of non-essential information is just to add more specificity. Right? It just adds more details to what's being talked about in the sentence. Okay? Now, there are certain types of modifiers that you want to be aware of. A modifier is just basically a group of words that describes something in the sentence, right? And we'll talk about what that something is. It's usually a noun. But modifiers, again, just a group of words just describes or modifies, right, something in the sentence. And there's different types of modifiers that you want to be aware of, okay? And we'll go over them with some examples. So I think before we look at these examples, you guys, the most important, I think one of the most important things that you have to keep in mind is this, and you want to write this down. The subject of a sentence, right? The subject of a sentence will never be found inside of modifiers or non-essential information. Okay, let me say that again. The main subject of a sentence will never be found inside of modifiers and non-essential information. So why is that important to know? Well, it's important to know because if you're able to identify what the modifiers are in a sentence, or if you're able to identify what non-essential information is in a sentence, right, then you can ignore the words that are written in these additional pieces of information, right, so that you can more successfully locate and identify the main subject of that sentence. Okay, so keep that in mind. And you can just kind of mentally cross out the modifiers and non-essential information when you see it appear in a sentence, right? When you're looking for the subject of that verb. Okay, so if you look at this example here, you guys, it says a team of researchers has found evidence of water beneath the surface of Mars. Okay, so the main subject of the sentence is a team, right? We have a modifier called a prepositional phrase that adds more detail to the subject and that appears between the subject and the verb. The verb of this sentence is has, right? Has found. That's the verb. So a prepositional phrase, you guys, is one of the most common types of modifiers that you'll see on the SAT. So if you're not sure what a prepositional phrase is, this foundational knowledge piece will help you guys out. So preposition is basically a group of words that begins with a prepositional phrase is just a group of words that begins with a preposition and it ends in a noun. So prepositions, you guys, are generally like location words. They're words that talk about direction, location, but it's kind of vague. The way that I think about prepositions, and there's too many in the English language for you to memorize, so don't memorize it, but just try to identify it. That's all. The way that I think about prepositions, these guys are like the small connecting words, right? That kind of add more detail to a sentence, right? So examples of prepositions would be like in, right? On, right? Of, to, for, right? With, after, right? Above. So these are all examples, and there's too many prepositions to memorize, right? So don't try it. Don't try to memorize it. The thing is, you want to be able to identify it, right? So you have to be able to locate or identify when prepositions appear, because when a preposition appears, it's always going to be paired with a noun, and in that pairing, the preposition plus a noun is going to create your prepositional phrase, right? So if I say, so in this example here, a team of researchers, right? Of is my preposition. It's that connecting word, right? And then it pairs with the noun researchers. Okay, so of researchers, right? And it's the job of a prepositional phrase is to add specific details, right, to information in the sentence, right? So of researchers just specifies, right, which team we're talking about. So it's not a team of dentists, it's not a team of doctors, it's not a team of teachers, it's a team of researchers, right? So locating the prepositional phrase is important because, like I said earlier, you guys, the subject of the sentence will never be found inside of a prepositional phrase, right? So knowing when the preposition begins and when it ends is really important. So you can cross it out or mentally kind of ignore it, right? Because researchers won't be your subject, right? So a team is the subject, which is why you see the singular verb has, right? Because a team is referring to one group of people, right? So it's singular, and a singular subject has to always take a singular verb, right? So you would say he has, right? Have is the plural verb form. Right? You don't say a team have found, you say a team has found. Okay. What you might also see the SAT do is you might also see them kind of add prepositional phrases kind of back to back consecutively like this, right? So now, if you have this phrase, you have a team of researchers is a prepositional phrase, right? And then we have another preposition from various disciplines, right? And so this preposition from is paired with the noun disciplines, right? So we have like back-to-back prepositional phrases, right? Of researchers from various disciplines. And the SAT can kind of create more and just consecutive prepositional phrase after prepositional phrase after prepositional phrase, right? To make it harder for you to find the subject and the verb of the sentence, right? So just understand, they could say something like a team of researchers from various disciplines across numerous countries in the world. It's they can kind of keep going, right, with prepositional phrases. And again, prepositional phrases are just designed to add more specificity, right? That's just what modifiers do to the sentence. Okay, and so now we're going to talk about a concept that's really important for you to know. Write down these two terms, you guys. So you have to, in order to get subject-verb questions, verb agreement questions correct consistently, you have to know the difference between a complete subject and a simple subject. So let's talk about this. So a complete subject is basically the entire group of words, right? Is the entire group of words that make up the subject of the sentence. So in this example here, a team of researchers from various disciplines is your complete subject. On the other hand, a simple subject is that one word, right, that comes before modifiers, right, and before non-essential information, right? And the simple subject is that one word that makes up the main subject of that sentence. Okay, so again, what you're looking for when you're solving subject verb agreement questions is you're looking for the simple subject. Right? You're looking for that one word and identifying whether that simple subject is singular or plural, right? So this is why it's kind of important to be on the lookout for modifiers, right? Because as soon as you see a modifier appear, like a preposition, right? Then you know you just read it to follow it to figure out where it ends, and you just mentally ignore it, right? Because you know the subject will never be found inside of modifiers, right? So again, the subject of the simple subject of this sentence is going to be a team. That's that one word that comes before the modifiers, right? The prepositional phrases in this case. Okay, so that's why we would say a team has, again, like we saw in that previous example. So prepositional phrases, one type of modifier that you might see. Another type of modifier that you might see is called relative clauses. Okay, so a relative clause is a type of dependent clause, right? A dependent clause, we don't have to talk about this in detail. I'm making other videos that really break down the different parts of a sentence, like an independent clause, a dependent clause, a phrase, a list, and adjectives in a list, which is really important for you guys to know and be able to identify. But basically, a dependent clause in a simple sense is just an incomplete sentence, right? Like it cannot stand alone as a complete sentence, okay? But one specific type of dependent clause is called a relative clause. And a relative clause is a group of words that has a verb in it and that always begins with what's called a relative pronoun. Okay, a relative pronoun plus like a verb, right? It has a verb in it. So relative pronouns, there's 7 relative pronouns in the English language, right? These are words like who and whom, whose, which, that, and then words like when and where can also function as a relative clause. Now, what a relative clause does in a sentence is a relative clause will always modify or describe the noun that came before it. Okay, so if we look at this example sentence here, it says, researchers who specialize in neuroplasticity have discovered that the brain can recognize itself by forming new neural connections throughout life. So in this case, in this example, the relative clause begins with the relative pronoun who, right? And we have a verb in it, specialize, right? The relative clause begins with who and it ends at who specialize in neuroplasticity, okay? It's important to be able to track information, to be able to identify when different parts of a sentence begins and when it ends, right? And again, we have another video in the future coming up. It's really going to help you guys out if you have trouble with sentence structure and punctuation rules and things like that. So anyways, this relative clause, who specialize in neuroplasticity, just modifies the noun, the researchers, right? So if you think to yourself, oh, who specializes in neuroplasticity? Oh, it's talking about the researchers, right? So you know it's modifying the researchers. And what it does is it really, it talks about a specific group, right? A certain type of researcher, right? Not researchers who specialize in business or researchers who graduated from top 10 schools. We're talking about researchers who specialize in neuroplasticity. It's those guys, okay? So relative clauses also act as modifiers, right? Because modifiers, as its basic definition, all it does is just a group of words that just describe something in the sentence, right? And that's what this is doing here. So in this case, again, just like in prepositional phrases, the main subject, the simple subject of the sentence will never be found inside of a relative clause. So as soon as you notice, as soon as you can observe a relative clause beginning, right, and just follow it to where it ends, you can mentally kind of eliminate or mentally erase, right? The information inside of that relative clause, because you know the main subject, the simple subject, will never be found inside of modifiers or non-essential information, right? So the simple subject of this sentence is researchers. So then ask yourself, is researchers a singular subject or is it a plural subject? Well, it ends in S, right? So we know that it's plural. It's referring to more than one researcher, more than one person. So because we have a plural subject, we have to have a plural verb to match or agree in number, right? Which is why we have the verb have. So we would say researchers have discovered. We don't say researchers has discovered, right? That would be subject verb disagreement. Okay? So modifiers, and there's different types of modifiers too. So see if you can do this one, you guys. The books that were given to me by grandmother remain in a safe place. So in this case, the relative clause, the modifier, is that were given to me by by grandmother, right? And that just describes the types of books, right? What books are you talking about? The books that were given to me by grandmother. Okay, and so you know again that the main subject of a sentence can never be found inside of modifiers, right? Like relative clauses. So you know the simple subject is books, which is plural, right? Which is why you have a plural verb, remain. So you would say they remain, right? You don't say they remains, right? And that's how you want to work through this. So the third type of modifiers that I want you guys to be aware of are what are called participles. Okay, so we have prepositional phrases, we have relative clauses, and then now we have participles. So there are two types of participles in the English language that you have to be familiar with on the SAT. So those are called the present participle. And present participle is easy to identify because it just adds an ing to the end of a verb, right? So instead of swim, it's going to be swimming. Instead of play, it's playing. Instead of sing, it's singing, right? Be, being, so on and so forth. That's the present participle form. And we also have past participles. Okay, past participles are a little bit trickier. There's no like one set format of how the word looks or how it is formed or created. But you guys are kind of familiar with this, right? So if I have the verb grow, the past tense, not the past participle, but the past tense form is grew. Right? Now the past participle is going to be what? Grown, right? So we have grow, grew, grown. Grown is your past participle. What if I have the verb sing? We have sang as the past tense, right? So sing, sang, and then the past participle is sung, right? So sing, sang, sung. Right? That's the past participle form, you guys. Again, there is no sort of grammar rules that I can teach you here. You just have to be able to identify it and recognize it is all. Okay? Now, the thing is with participles, like present participles and past participles, even though they look like verbs, they don't function like a verb. Right? When they're by themselves, when they don't have any other verbs that come before it, these participles function like adjectives, like they function like modifiers, right? They function like adjectives because adjectives and modifiers do the same thing. They just describe a noun, right? So participle phrases are nothing more than just words that begin with the present or past participle, right? And its job is to describe, to add more specific details to the noun, right? So for example, if I say movies made in the 1990s are not as good as those made in the 2000s. So the complete subject of the sentence is movies made in the 1990s. That's my complete subject, right? Now, the modifier in the sentence is this participle phrase made in the 1990s. This is a past participle phrase because the past participle form of the verb make is made, right? And so this phrase, past participle phrase, made in the 1990s, is just adding more specific details to the noun movies, right? So it functions like an adjective, right? Or a modifier because it describes a word in another thing in the sentence, right? So you're really answering the question, which movies are you talking about? Are you talking about the movies produced by Tom Cruise? No, I'm not talking about those movies. Are you talking about movies made in the 1950s? No, not those movies. I'm talking about the movies made in the 1990s.
right? So that's going to be that modifier that kind of specifies which movies you're talking about. Okay. So again, why is this important? Well, it's important because the main subject, the simple subject of the sentence, right, can never be found inside of modifiers. And if we're able to identify participle phrases as modifiers, we know that we can ignore, mentally erase, or mentally cross out the words inside that participle phrase. Right? So now I know that my simple subject of the sentence is movies, right, which now tells me that movies is a plural subject. So because it's a plural subject, it has to agree with the plural verb, right? Which is why you see are here. You don't say movies is, you say movies are, right? They are, right? So that's an example of the third type of modifier that you'll see, right? Here's an example of a present participle phrase. So the students studying in the library have a big exam tomorrow. So the complete subject is the students studying in the library. The modifier is the present participle phrase, studying in the library. Studying in the library begins with an ing word, right? The present participle. And again, its job, these participle phrases, they function like adjectives and not like verbs when they're by themselves. If I said the students were studying, then that would be a verb. But it's because of the word were that makes it a verb, not because of the word studying. Right? But when I get rid of the verb were and put the students studying in the library, now I don't have a verb there. Right? So you cannot see this as a verb phrase. You have to see this as an adjective phrase. Right? The students studying in the library is an adjective, that phrase that describes which students we're talking about. Right? We're not talking about the students playing outside. We're not talking about the students watching a movie. We're talking about the students studying in the library. Those students, right? And so again, um, when you identify these participles, you know that the subject can never be inside of the participle phrase, right? Can never be inside of this additional information stuff. So you know the simple subject of the sentence is students. So just ask yourself, is students a singular subject or is it a plural subject? Students is plural, right? And so you have to make sure when you have a plural subject that it agrees with a plural verb, which is why you have as the verb and not has, right? You would say the students have a big exam. You don't say the students has a big exam. Okay. Now, um, another thing that I wanted to kind of hit on, and again, you can really tell I'm really trying to give you guys all of the uh, everything that I know about this stuff, right? Like I'm really not holding anything back. I wanted to keep these lessons to about 10 minutes long, but I realized that they're not going to be. I'm just going to be talking as if I were teaching. And so this is just going to be me just trying to help each and every one of you guys out in some way um, achieve your goals on this test. So, what I wanted to take a look at here, you guys, was different types of non-essential information. We don't have to know about non-essential information in too much detail right now. I'll talk about it in depth in another video, but I want to show you guys some of the different ways that the SAT can, add in this additional information stuff like modifiers and non-essential information to separate the subject, right, from the verb. Okay, so if we look here, you'll see a combination sometimes too, right? Like you see in this example. So here it says, aliens from another galaxy, intent on wiping out humanity, arrive in our solar system with technology far beyond our comprehension. Okay, so what I want you guys to identify is, notice how we have these. So first of all, is tell me what the complete subject of the sentence is. Okay, so the way that you can think about the complete subject in this case is you can look at it as aliens from another galaxy, or just the complete subject. You can just kind of think about it mentally. This won't be precise, but it'll be enough to help you guys out. You can think about the complete subject as things that include non-essential information up until the verb. You know, it's not 100% precise and accurate, but it's helpful. And my goal is not to be. My goal is to help you guys out. That's it, right? in the simplest and most effective way that I know how. So you can think about this whole thing as your complete subject, right? And why is that important? It's important because, like I said, the you'll never find your simple subject inside of these additional information things, right? Like modifiers and non-essential information, right? So the simple subject will never be found inside of non-essential information, and like prepositional phrases or relative clauses or participle phrases or things like that. So in this case, if you look at that as your complete subject, then you can ask yourself, okay, well, when you read it from the beginning of the sentence, you notice the preposition, right? Aliens from. Where does it end? So it begins, this prepositional phrase begins with the preposition from and ends with the noun galaxy. And then notice how, you guys, we have a comma here, right? The purpose of this comma is going to be to open the non-essential information, right? So your job now is just to read it to figure out where it ends, right? So intent on wiping out humanity, boom. So we have another comma here. Now the purpose of this comma is to close. It closes the non-essential information, or it finishes it, right? And so we can mentally cross out information that's non-essential because we know that our subject won't appear in it. And then if you just keep reading, you notice that we arrive at the verb, right? Arrive, right? And so now, because we have the verb in the sentence, right, yeah, we're done we don't have any other information that refers to the subject of the sentence is all. So now you know that your simple subject of the sentence is aliens, right? That's your simple subject. And you know that aliens is a plural subject. Because it's a plural subject, you know it's going to agree with plural verbs, right? So this is why you see arrive as the correct answer or the correct form of the verb, because you would say aliens arrive. You wouldn't say aliens arrives in our solar system, right? You would say they arrive. You wouldn't say they arrives. Okay, so plural subjects have to agree with plural verbs again. So I think at this point you guys are getting the hang of it. So I'll just show you guys another one. So these last two examples are pretty interesting because there are some kind of tricky or challenging ways that the SAT can test you on subject-verb agreement. And that's what I wanted to show you guys here. So if we look at this sentence, you guys, we read Frodo, and then we notice a comma here, right? Which is going to begin non-essential information. So, as well as his loyal companions, Sam, Merry, and Pippin, right? We notice this comma here before the verb fights, right? So we know that this comma here is going to be to close or finish the non-essential information, right? So in this case, notice how, you guys, the simple subject of the sentence is Frodo, and Frodo is a singular, right? It refers to one person. So that singular subject, Frodo, has to agree with the singular verb fights, right? So Frodo fights to protect the One Ring, right? Now, it's a little bit tricky because even though you have other people in the sentence like Sam, Merry, and Pippin, the way that this information is structured is as non-essential information, right? As well as comma, comma, you know it's non-essential. So you have to ignore that, even though it's kind of hard to do and it could be confusing to some students. Now compare this sentence with this following sentence. If I say Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin, so now you guys, my complete subject of the sentence is Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin. But what's interesting is my simple subject of the sentence is also Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin. Why? Because when we use the word and, we're not creating non-essential information. When we use the word and, we're just connecting subjects, right? So if I say Jack and Jill, you want to consider that to be like a plural subject, right? Just like if I have Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin, you want to consider this as 4 people, right? Or a plural subject. So when we have a plural subject, this is why we have a plural verb fight, right? Because we're saying they, Sam, Merry, Frodo, and Pippin, they fight to protect the ring, right? And that's different from the previous sentence, right? Where instead of using the connecting word and, right? We use non-essential information, right? As well as, now, like I said, the simple subject of a sentence will never be found inside of non-essential information. And so you have to just follow it to figure out where it ends, right? As well as loyal companion Sam. Now we have a list, right? So the purpose of this comma and this comma here is to separate the items in the list, right? Sam, comma, Mary, comma, and Pippin, right? And the purpose of this comma here after Pippin is going to be to close the non-essential, right? So words like Sam, Mary, and Pippin in this example don't, you can't consider that to be the simple subject, right? And so that's a nice little thing to be aware of. Okay, so those are some good pieces of foundational knowledge, I think. And there's one more thing that I wanted to talk to you guys about, the foundational knowledge about the English language and verbs in the ways that you're going to be tested on the SAT. By the way, you guys, I should also mention that um, everything that I say, right, everything that I say is based on my observations of, studying for, preparing for, analyzing, observing, taking these tests. And I've taken a lot of these tests. I've probably spent over 10,000 hours. I've definitely spent over 10,000 hours just thinking about the SAT stuff. And so everything that I talk about is based on my observations. So I won't ever teach you guys anything about the English language that's not relevant to the SAT. Everything that I teach you guys about the English language and grammar is because I've seen it on the test in some fashion. And this information is going to help you out in some way, right, to be better or answer the question correctly. Okay, so that's the reason that I teach the way that I do. It's just based on personal experiences all. And one of the things that I thought would be necessary to talk about, and another way that the SAT tries to trick you for subject verb agreement, is what are known as tricky nouns. Okay. Tricky nouns is kind of, it is what it sounds like. It's just like nouns that you're not sure whether they should be singular subjects or plural, right? Or sometimes even both, right? So this is where I think it's helpful to have some base knowledge of the English language and grammar to help you guys out. Because if you know that a noun looks like it's plural, but it's actually singular, like you're going to need a singular verb and not a plural one. Okay, so that's the reason why I want to talk about tricky nouns in this part of the lecture, in this part of the lesson. So tricky nouns. So one category, the way that you want to think about this, the way that you want to learn this is by chunking it, by grouping it, right, by category or type. So the first category of tricky nouns that you want to be aware of are the nouns that are always singular. Okay, so these nouns that are always singular are, I would say, I'm going to put the ones, right, the ones and the bodies. Okay, the bodies. So what I mean by this is, words like someone, no one, right? Anyone, everyone, right? These words with the one in it, right? These guys are always singular, right? So even if you say everyone, even though the word everyone kind of implies that you have more than one person in it, you still want to think about this noun as a singular noun because it refers to a collective group, right? One collective whole, a singular, right? So everyone is just kind of classified as one thing, right? Or one group of people, right? And so that's how you want to think about it as singular as well. And same thing with the bodies, right? Somebody, anybody, nobody, right? Everybody, these are also going to always be considered to be singular. Okay, so you want to say, nobody is home, right? Everybody looks happy, right? Someone is at the door, right? Everyone looks hungry, right? These nouns sometimes can be kind of tricky, but just know that they're always going to be singular, okay? And this also goes with what are called collective nouns, right? So collective nouns are words like a crowd, group, a team, a band, audience, right? So even though like the word like a crowd, even though a crowd can consist of thousands of people in it, you still want to think about this as one collective, right? As one group, right, of people. So because it's one group of people, you want to consider this to be a singular noun, okay? A singular subject. So the way that you make this plural is you just go, oh, crowds, right? Crowds or groups, right? These would be the ways to turn the singular subject group into a plural subject, right? Groups, teams, right? Audiences, bands, so on and so forth. Okay, so that'll help you guys. So understanding these nouns that are always going to be singular can be helpful. Also, you want to look for nouns that are always going to be plural. And nouns that are always plural are going to be words like both, a few, right? Several, many. These words are considered to always be plural, right? So if I say both of the students, right? Both is going to be a plural subject. Yeah, so you should have a plural verb to match, right? So you say both of the students are smart, right? Several people are late, right? Many are sleepy, right? So these words are always going to be plural, is it? Okay. And there is a sort of third category of words that it really depends. Like sometimes they can be singular and sometimes they can be plural. It just really depends on the context. Okay. So one of those is when you have either or neither nor. Okay. When you have a phrase like either or neither nor, the information that appears closest to the verb, right? This one here, this noun, is going to determine whether the verb is singular or plural. Okay. So for example, if I say either the coach or the players, right? So in this case, you want to look at this noun here, the players, right? And because players is plural, you know the verb has to be plural, right? So either the coach or the players are, right? But if you have it backwards, if you have it flipped around, if you say either the players or the coach, then you have to consider this to be a singular subject, right? Because the coach is going to be the subject that comes after, right? The or, closest to the verb, and the coach is singular. So you want to say either the player or the coach is. Isn't that kind of interesting? Yeah, the English language can get kind of funky, right? Like that. So that's the same thing with neither nor as well. If you have, so other words that really depend on the context, whether the subject is singular or plural, are words like all, some, and none. Okay, so in this case, these words can be combined with a noun, right? So if I say all the students or some of the cake, right? So these words can be paired with nouns, right, to create more complete subjects, right? So in these cases, you have to look at the noun that these words are paired with to determine whether the subject is singular or plural. So in the example of all the students, students is a plural subject, right? Is a plural noun. So in this case, all is going to be plural, right? So you want to say all the students are missing, right? All the students have their books, right? You want to use plural verbs in this case. But if I say, some of the cake, or if I say all of the cake, right now in this case, the noun, right, that's combined with these words is the cake. and the cake is a singular noun, right? So in this case, you have to treat these words as a singular subject, right? So you would say some of the cake is missing, right? All of the cake was eaten, right? So in these cases, you would use a singular verb. Okay. So yeah, tricky nouns is, so these are the sort of general things or the foundational things that you should know, right? That can help you guys out with subject verb agreement. Now, you guys, what I want to do is, and we're already about an hour into this lesson, which is great, which is great. I hope you guys are finding this to be valuable in some way. So now, you guys, we're going to get into some actual training. Um, I'm going to share with you guys some processes, like how do you actually apply all of this knowledge now, right, to become a more skilled test taker. Right. So consider this to be training um, for subject verb agreement questions. Okay. So the first, and some of this stuff is going to be an overlap of what you heard in the foundational video, the overview video, and that's okay. Just hearing this stuff over and over again is a great thing. It's going to help you guys to remember this material better, right? Just by hearing it over and over again. Okay. So the first thing that you should know, the first tip that I could share with you to become a better test taker, when you're answering grammar questions on the SAT, um, you know that you know that the reading and the writing questions are kind of placed together in the same module, right, in the same test. But you also know that the first half of the questions are reading questions and the second half are writing questions, right? You can also tell when you get like a writing question, like a grammar question, because the question stem is the same, right? It's going to say which choice completes the text so that it conforms to the conventions of standard English. That's how you know you're getting a grammar question. And then you also have like transition questions, and then the rhetorical synthesis questions, the ones where students take notes and then the student has a goal. The student wants to do this, right? And your job is to choose the answer, right, that best uses the information in the notes to achieve that goal. So those are all grammar questions. But the thing is, for why is this important? When you see a grammar question on the test, the way that you want to work through a grammar question, right, matters. And so this is what I found to be the most helpful, most practical way to approach a grammar question. Okay. So the first thing is you want to take a glance, like don't start by reading the passage immediately. Okay. Instead, you guys, yeah, your eyes should glance over to the answer choices. So just look at the answer choices, kind of like just holistically, right? Just like an overview of it. Okay. So you see allows, are allowing, have, and allow. You don't have to read into this in too much detail, but just take a glance at the answer choices, right? Now, looking at the answer choices, you can kind of tell what grammar concept you're being tested on, right? So what's the question type that you're being tested on? So the answer choices give you a very great clue as to what concept the SAT is testing you on for that particular question. Okay, so if we just look at it from a general sense, this is pretty straightforward, right? Are, allowing, have, allow, allowed, allows. This, we know we're being tested on verbs. Okay, but I want you guys to go a little bit more. I want you guys to go a little bit deeper with this. I told you guys there are 3 ways that the SAT can test you on verbs, right? And I told you that it's important to think about verbs as a mental checklist, like a hierarchy. So even though we know we're being tested on verbs, in what way are verbs being tested for this question? Okay, so because we're talking about subject-verb agreement, well, subject-verb agreement is the first thing that you should think about, right, when you have a verb question, right? So are they testing me on subject verb agreement? Right now, how do you tell? Right, you tell based off of the answer choices. Okay, so if you guys notice a difference between a singular and a plural verb in 2 of your answer choices, at least 2, right? Then you know that subject verb agreement is one of the things that you're being tested on here. Right? So notice answer choice A has the verb, singular verb allows, right? He allows, it allows. And then answer choice D has a plural verb allow, right? As soon as you notice that difference, you're going to be thinking, oh, this question is testing me on subject-verb agreement. At least that's one of the things, right? It doesn't have to be the case that all of the answer choices have like singular and plural verbs to it, but as long as two of them have that singular and plural verb difference, that's enough for you to think about subject-verb agreement. Okay, and so that's the first thing that I want you guys to do, and you'll start to notice how the answer choices kind of look, right? The subject-verb agreement answer choices kind of look all like similarly. Um, with the singular, with the difference between like a singular and a plural verb. That's almost always the case. Okay. So now that you know that they're testing you on subject verb agreement, that's going to affect the way that you read, right? Because we read for different purposes, right? Some people read for pleasure, others read for to understand the material, others read to be able to teach the knowledge and pass it forward, right? So we all read for different purposes. Well, one of those purposes that we can be intentional about when we read is reading for grammar, right? Reading for grammar. And you know that because you're being tested on subject verb agreement, right? Well, what type of grammar concept should you be looking out for? You want to be looking out for the subject of the sentence, right? You want to be able to find the simple subject, right? So everything that we did or learned up to this point can now be applied in a very focused and directed way, okay? So when we read the sentence, cool. So now when we read the passage, you guys, so it doesn't take too long, right, to take a glance at this and kind of know that you're being tested on verbs and more specifically subject verb agreement. It might be a little bit unnatural and unfamiliar and might take a little bit of time in the beginning, but if you guys just keep doing it, I promise you it gets easier and easier to notice or identify. Promise you guys. So take the time in the beginning to really look at it and study it, and then look for the patterns, right, that you notice. I'll be sure to point those out too as we kind of go through some other questions with subject verb agreement. But once we've done that, then we want to read the passage, right? And I like to just read from the beginning, even though this underlined portion is part of a different sentence, just read from the beginning. But when I'm reading the sentence that doesn't have an underlined portions to it, you're just reading to get the gist of what you're reading. That's it, right? So you don't have to read super carefully or super slowly. Just read to just generally understand what the heck is the writer talking about in this sentence, right? So it says the classic children's board game Chutes and Ladders is a version of an ancient Nepalese game. P.S. And again, you guys remember another tip. You heard me say this before, but I'll say it again. Another tip is you don't have to focus on pronunciation, right? The SAT doesn't give you points, right, for pronouncing words perfectly. So don't care about it. I know a lot of us, it's unnatural because when we're reading silently, you're kind of reading, um, you're doing what's called subvocalizing. Yeah, even though you're reading silently, in your mind, you're actually pronouncing words when you read, right? So in your mind, you're saying parampada sopanat pata, right? That's how you're doing it. You're just not saying it out loud, but you're thinking it, right? You're pronouncing words in your mind. Don't do that. Okay. The SAT, I've noticed that the SAT does this on purpose, where they'll put in like long words that are hard to pronounce, right? In a lot of these passages, and they're doing it to distract you guys. So don't fall into that trap. So the way that I strategize against this is really like you can just pronounce it how you think it sounds, but don't stress about it, right? Or you can kind of abbreviate it. You can say like parasopa, whatever. You can even go PS, right? PS. It doesn't matter what you do. What matters is that you understand, right, what this word is doing. So as long as you know that PS is a Nepalese game, that's enough, right? So don't get distracted by pronunciation, you guys. Okay. So continuing on, it'll save you guys some time and a lot of stress. It says in both games, players encounter good or bad spaces while traveling along a path. Landing on one of the good spaces allows a player to skip ahead and arrive closer to the end goal. Okay, so a couple of things to note here about strategy or about test taking skills. So, first of all, you guys, make sure that you read to the end of the sentence, okay? Where that period is when you have an underlined portion or underlined blank. Read to the end of the sentence. I've seen a lot of students who just stop in the middle of a sentence where the underlined blank is, and then they try to figure out the answer, right? Don't do that. First of all, when you're reading the passage the first time through, read to the end of the sentence, and all you're doing is you're just making observations. Okay, you're just making observations. That's one thing. Okay. Some of the observations you can make, right? They're just going to be different based on what concept or question type you're being tested on, right? So if they're testing you on subject verb agreement, well, maybe some of the observations you want to be making is the subject of the sentence, right? This complete subject, simple subject, modifiers, prepositional phrases, like these types of things, right? But for other types of question types or concepts, your observations might be a little bit different, is all. Okay, but that's just an example. That's just what I mean is you're just making observations. You're just observing things, is all. And you're not trying to figure anything out, right? You're just reading to the end of the sentence and just making observations. That's the number one. That's one tip. The second tip is, guys, just plug in whatever answer choice A says, right? For any grammar questions, I do this, except for transition questions. When you're reading a sentence with an underlined blank in it, just plug in answer choice A, even though it's wrong. Just plug it in and just read the sentence all the way through. Even though it's it's going to be incorrect, it's just do that as a habit because it's going to be much easier for you to figure out what they're testing you on, right? When you plug in whatever answer choice A kind of says. Okay, so I do this for all grammar questions, except for transition questions, right? The answer choices that have words like however, nevertheless, and similarly, and eventually, and things like that. So for those questions, I don't plug in the transition word, but for all other grammar questions, I do. I plug in answer choice A and read it. Okay, cool. So now that we talked about that part of the process, about just some basic sort of test taking skills and abilities that I want you guys to get in the habit of doing, nextly then is to be able to locate, right, our simple subject, right, of the sentence. Okay, so simple and complete subjects. So just for the sake of time, you guys, because I do have a lot of other examples that I want to show you, and I think we did this question before together too in the overview video, is the complete, but now you have some extra grammar terms, right, that you didn't know before. So the complete subject of the sentence, you guys, is, so notice here in the sentence, players encounter good or bad spaces while traveling along a path. So I observe a punctuation here, the semicolon. So I know that a semicolon's job is to separate two independent clauses, right? Independent clause 1, semicolon, independent clause number 2. Okay, so I know this underlined verb here, this underlined blank, is part of independent clause 2. So I'm looking for the subject in the second independent clause. So here, the complete subject of the second independent clause is landing on one of the good spaces. Okay, and the simple subject of this sentence is landing. Okay, so ing words, another thing to note here, you guys, ing words, we talked about these as being present participles, right? Present participles can also function as the subject of a sentence, right? So when present participles are by themselves, they never function like verbs. They function usually as modifiers, like adjectives, but they can also function as a subject of a sentence. Yeah, and another good tip to know here, you guys, is when ing words are used as a subject of a sentence, these guys are always singular. Okay, so ing words as subjects are always singular, right? And so now you say landing on one of the good spaces. So on is a preposition, right? So that tells me, okay, I have a prepositional phrase that's starting. So where does this prepositional phrase end? So on one of the good spaces. As when you just read it, you guys can all figure out when these modifiers end. Just read it. You can all figure it out. It's going to end before the verb here, right? So because landing is always a singular subject, right? We know that we need a singular verb, right? This is why we can cross out answer choices B, R, and C, just have, which is plural, and then D, allow, because B, C, and D are all plural verbs. Okay. R, if you guys aren't familiar with R and to have, like to be and to have, these are some of the more common, two of the most common verbs that you have to know about on the SAT. These are both verbs, right? The singular forms of to be are is and are for the I'm sorry, the singular form is and was and was and was. These are singular, and the plural form of to be are and were. Right? It's just that is and are present tense, and was and were are past tense. Okay, and then to have as well. The singular form of to have is has, and then the plural verb is have. Right? So you would say he has. You don't say they has. Right? You would say they have, but you wouldn't say they has. Right? Oh, you wouldn't say he have. You wouldn't say he have. I apologize. So recognizing that, I know that the correct answer to this question has got to be A, right? Has got to be A. Now, look at how great this is, you guys. So, a couple of things to know is once you know how the SAT is going to test you on this stuff, you can get really, really efficient with answering these grammar questions. You know, I think that the writing questions are the easiest questions to master, and they should take the least amount of time, right? And I can train you guys to answer these questions pretty efficiently and to get these questions right almost always, right, correctly. Um, but once you're able to do this at a sort of very efficient and proficient level, you're able to save a lot of time, and then you can use that time to answer the questions that usually take a little bit longer, right? Like the reading questions and things like that. Um, but anyways, yeah, look at how cool this is, you guys, right? So I didn't even have to think about verb tenses, right? Didn't have to think about anything else other than do I need a singular or a plural verb, right? And so that's the benefit of this, of knowing what they're testing you on, right? And then kind of working through eliminating the wrong answers based on your knowledge now, based on your fundamental or foundational knowledge of that concept. So if we look at another question here, you'll see that these, by the way, this first set of questions, these are all from the College Board practice exams that you can download for free on the College Board website. I labeled what practice test number it is, what module you can find this question in, and what the question number is, right? You'll also notice here it's labeled as a subject-verb agreement, but that should be obvious because this whole lesson is talking about subject-verb agreement. So anyways, that'll be helpful for some of you guys who want to go to and download the material and kind of see for yourselves. I wanted to put some practice questions from the actual test because I wanted you to see that this is exactly how the real test makers are doing it. I also have other questions that I created that you'll see that look very similar to these ones from the College Board. And so just to give you guys some extra practice and repetition for this concept. So here, let's go through our process, you guys. Step number 1, take a glance at the answer choices. Can you see that you're being tested on subject-verb agreement? Right? How do you know? Right? You know because you have a difference between a singular verb has and a plural verb have. By the way, when you're looking at these verb phrases like has enhanced or are enhancing or have enhanced, guys, look at the first word, right? Has and have to determine whether that's singular or plural. So when you say has, you don't have to worry about this word enhanced to determine whether it's singular or plural. But you know that has is singular, so this is going to be a singular verb. Same thing with are, right? Look at the first word are to determine whether it's singular or plural. You know that are is a plural verb, so be is plural. And then you know that have is plural, right? So that'll be helpful. So as soon as you notice this difference between a singular and a plural verb in 2 of your answer choices at least, then you know that subject-verb agreement is what you're looking for, okay? So it doesn't take too long to do this, and you'll start to kind of recognize the patterns, right? Notice how the answer choices here kind of look similarly. I know the words enhanced and allow are different, but look at just generally how they look, right? Like have allowed, allows allow, right? Has have enhanced, enhance are enhancing, right? Kind of looks similar, right? And so that's just kind of helpful, right? For you to kind of get a general sense of, right, the patterns and the ways that they formulate, right, answer choices. So now we're going to go read the passage and we're going to try to look for, right, that subject of the sentence, right, of this verb. So the passage reads, Bengali author Toru Dutz a sheaf gleaned in French fields, a volume of English translations of French poems, has enhanced scholars' understanding of the transnational and multilingual context in which Dutt lived and worked. Okay, so remember, read to the end of the sentence and plug in answer choice A, right? Just get in the habit of doing that. You're training yourself to become a skilled test taker. And that skill is going to translate to feeling confident and feeling relaxed and calm under pressure, because you're just going to be doing certain things the same way because you've practiced it that way over and over again. Okay. So now, what I can tell you guys is here, the complete subject of the sentence, right? So we have Bengali author Toru Dutt's A Sheaf Gleaned in French Fields. This is your complete subject, right? Then we also have like non-essential information. We have this comma, right, before a, which is going to be used to open up the non-essential. Like I told you guys before, a common place to put non-essential information is between the subject and the verb, right? So a volume of English translations of French poems. You know that the non-essential ends over here, right? You also see this comma here to close it, and you know it ends, the non-essential ends here, not just because of that comma, but because we have a verb now, right? The main verb has enhanced that comes right after. Okay, so why is this important? Well, it's important because I told you guys the main subject of the sentence can never be found inside of non-essential information, right? Or modifiers. So the main subject of the sentence can never be found, right, in non-essential information or modifiers, right? And another thing that, so this, that's, so we can look at that as a complete subject. The simple subject of the sentence, you guys, is a sheaf gleaned in French fields. Right now, guys, tell me, is this a singular or a plural subject? Well, it's got to be singular, right? It's a singular subject because it refers to one book. It's the title of a book. And so because it refers to just one thing, right, one book, we have to consider this to be a singular subject, right? And we know that singular subjects take singular verbs. So the correct answer here has to be A, right? Because has enhanced is the only singular verb that you see. Are, have, and enhance are all plural verbs, so we can cross that out immediately, right? And so A would be the correct answer for this question. Guys, there's one more thing that I want to talk to you guys about in terms of your process. So one of the mistakes that a lot of students make when they are looking for the subject, is that they go backwards from the verb. Don't do that, right? So a lot of students kind of go backwards from the verb, right, to find the subject. So they're going to say, oh, if you look at the word here, poems, a lot of students think the subject poems, the noun poems is your subject, but that's not the case, right? So, but a lot of students think this, right? And so if they think poems is my subject and poems is plural, I'm going to need a plural verb, right? And if they think that, they're going to cross out the wrong answer immediately, right? So my tip for those of you who are having trouble with subject-verb agreement is, guys, when you're answering these questions, when you're looking for the subject of that verb, don't go backwards from the verb. Don't go backwards from the verb. In fact, what the SAT does is that the SAT will oftentimes put like plural nouns that come before the underlying verb, right? Just to kind of confuse you guys. Okay? So poems is plural, but you know the noun or the subject is singular because it's referring to one book, right? But this is how the SAT is going to try to trick you and trap you into choosing the wrong answer. So don't fall into that trap, you guys, right? So instead of going backwards from the verb, instead go back. Go back to the beginning of the sentence and go forward. Okay, so this can help you to more easily identify that extra information stuff like prepositional phrases and relative clauses and non-essential information to really help you to find what that simple subject can be, right? So like I said, the simple subject is that word that comes after adjectives, right? So Bengali author Toru Dutt's. I know these are all adjectives because Toru Dutt's with the apostrophe S, right? That's like the possessive form. So think about that as kind of functioning like the adjective. It's not the noun. So then we have our simple subject here, right? A sheaf gleaned in French fields, right? So that's my simple subject. And then now I notice the comma here. We talked about the non-essential information that comes right after the simple subject, right? Um, so doing it, looking for the subject like this, where you go back to the beginning of the sentence and then you read it from the beginning, is going to be more of a consistent way for you guys to answer these questions correctly. Okay, so do that as as part of your process for working through these questions. Um, moving on, you guys. So these examples are actually examples that I wrote from my digital SAT writing workbook, and this isn't hasn't been released yet. It's still in like the proofreading and editing stages. But if you guys want access to content like these, like deliberate practice content that focuses on specific question types, just let me know, you guys, and I can give you guys access to this stuff, no problem. Again, my number one goal for these videos is to help you, right? Is to give you guys the knowledge and the tools to be able to get fewer than 5 wrong consistently on this test. And that is, when I tell you it's a mission, it's a mission. So whatever it takes, you guys, yeah. Um, I'm committed. I'm committed to your success. And I want you guys to be committed to your success as I am to yours. So you'll see. Taking a look at this question, take let's work on the process. And if you guys want to pause the video here and try to practice solving this question using the process and the steps that I talked about, do so. But if I were to interact with you live, I would be training you by asking you this question. Okay, what's step number one? What's the first thing we got to do? And you would tell me, we got to take a look at the answer choices, right? So and then I'll ask you, do you notice a difference between a singular and a plural verb? You'll be like, oh, yes. I'd say, well, what is it? Then you would say, oh, answer choice A, have become, is a plural verb. And answer choice C, has become, is a singular verb, right? So as soon as you notice the difference between a singular and a plural verb, you're thinking, oh, this question is testing me on subject-verb agreement. At least that's one of the concepts, okay? So then what do? Well, then you read the beginning of the sentence, right? And then you plug in answer choice A as you're reading, and you read to the end of the sentence. So here it says, while this guy, a prominent Argentinian author known for his intricate and metaphysical short stories, was not initially recognized by his home country's literary establishment, his prolific body of work, which includes the collections F and the Alf, have become widely regarded as some of the most innovative and influential writing of the 20th century. Okay, so we have a handful here, right? Now, this is where you guys, understanding sentence structure is going to be really helpful. Sentence structure is one of the most important things that you have to know about the English language. Like, you have to master sentence structure. And I'm going to create a whole series. That'll be my next series of videos, is really teaching you guys everything, the foundational pieces, the building blocks of sentence structure and grammar. And then with that knowledge, you'll be able to really dissect these sentences with a lot more confidence. But for the sake of this video, I'll just try to keep this kind of short. So I'll just take you guys through my thought process of what I see in the sentence. And don't worry if you don't understand everything that I'm saying, but I'm pretty sure some of you guys will. So when I read the sentence, it says, while Jorge Borges, I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be a dependent clause, right? This is part of a dependent clause. Then I notice I have a comma here, which is now going to provide me with non-essential information. It just gives me more details about the guy, right? And I know that this ends here. If I just follow it, read it to the end, metaphysical short stories, it's going to end right here. Okay, so now the sentence structure that I have is I have like part of a dependent clause, a DC, comma, I have non-essential information, comma, and then now I have the rest of the dependent clause, right? Was not initially recognized by his home country's literary establishment. Ends right here before this comma. Right, so then now I have the rest of the DC, right? And then I have a comma here. And then now I have the independent clause, right? His prolific body of work. Ooh, that kind of looks like the subject of my independent clause, right? The subject of the IC. Then now I have a comma again. Now I have non-essential information, right? This non-essential which clause, right? Which includes the collections F and the ELF. And I know it ends right here, right? So again, now I have non-essential information as well. And then I have comma. Now I have the verb and the rest of the independent clause, the IC. Right, so this is my sentence structure, and the SAT is known to create sentence structures that are very complicated, that have a lot of parts, like dependent clauses, non-essential information, relative clauses, and things like that. And even these parts can be broken up, right? We saw the subject of the independent clause separated from the verb of the independent clause. And they can do this, they can make sentences like this, right, that are still grammatically correct, but just make it a lot harder for you to identify, right, what the subject is. But this is what I see. Okay, so the complete subject of the sentence is what? So what's the complete subject of the independent clause? So in other words, if I'm trying to find the subject of this verb, this is your goal, right? Your goal is to find the subject of that verb. How do you do that, right? You would do that by asking yourself, right, like what has become or who has become, right? What has become in this case probably makes more sense, but you would say what has become widely regarded, what has become widely regarded, right? Then that'll help you define the subject. Now again, when you're looking for the subject of the sentence, you guys, don't go backwards from the verb. Don't go backwards from the verb, right? Instead, you want to go back to the beginning of the sentence and then go forward, right? So because I kind of already did this, while Jorge Borges and then all the ways to was initially recognized by his home country's literary establishment. So I know that the independent clause begins right here because I know the dependent clause ends there. Right? So now I know that his prolific body of work is my complete subject, right? Which includes the collections F and the ELF is non-essential information separated by 2 commas. Okay, so what's my simple subject, you guys? Do you know what the simple subject is? So the simple subject of this sentence is the word body. All right, how do I know that? Because it's the noun that comes after adjectives, right? Like his prolific, and then it comes before prepositional phrases, right? Of work is a prepositional phrase, right? Of is a preposition, of work is a prepositional phrase. So the body is my simple subject here, and body is a singular subject. So because it's a singular subject, it has to agree with the singular verb, right? So I know that answer choice C is the only answer that works because has is the only singular verb. Have become, and are becoming are all plural verbs. Okay, so that's how you would work through this, you guys. Really kind of systematically, and you see me kind of doing the same thing, right? Next question. Again, this is also from my workbook. Take a look at the answer choices. Take a glance at it. Does anyone notice a difference between a singular and a plural verb? Right? Like, yeah, we have has contributed and have. Right? Has is a singular verb and have is a plural verb. Right? Contribute and are contributing are both plural verbs. Right? So we see this difference between singular and plural verb. So we know that, oh, one of the things we're going to be tested on is subject verb agreement, right? So I got to read to find the subject of the sentence. Okay, so that's what I'll do here. So it says collaborating closely with Nino C on several research projects is Dr. David Smith, an American ecologist and expert in biochemical engineering, whose extensive knowledge of nutrient cycling in aquatic environments has greatly contributed to their joint efforts to better understand the role of microorganisms in shaping environmental processes. Okay, so first thing that I want to ask myself is what's the subject, right? What's the subject of this verb? Right? So in other words, the way that you can kind of do this is ask yourself, like, what has greatly contributed, right? What has greatly contributed to their joint efforts, right? So when you're reading the sentence from the beginning, you'll notice that the subject that you're looking for of this verb is actually going to be found inside of this dependent clause. So sometimes the verb that the SAT asks you to find the answer about is going to be verbs of dependent clauses, it doesn't always have to be the verb of the main sentence, like the independent clause. It can sometimes be the verb of like dependent clauses, like you see here. Okay, so I know that when I'm reading this, the complete subject of this dependent clause, it says whose extensive knowledge of nutrient cycling in aquatic environments. That's the complete subject of this dependent clause. Okay, and now the simple subject of this dependent clause is going to be, you guys know? The simple subject is knowledge, right? So again, remember the simple subject is the word that comes after, is the noun that comes after the adjectives, right? So whose extensive is the adjective, knowledge, and then it comes before prepositional phrases, right? So as soon as I notice the word of, I know that's a preposition, so it's going to begin a prepositional phrase. You just got to read it to figure out where this prepositional phrase ends. You guys can all do it as long as you just read. You say of nutrient cycling in aquatic environments. It ends right here before the verb, right? So then you ask yourself, what has greatly contributed? You would say, oh, the knowledge has, right? And so you ask yourself, is knowledge, is that a singular or is that a plural subject, right? And you would say knowledge is a singular subject, right? Is a singular subject because it just refers to one thing, like one concept, right? So because it's singular, you know that answer choice A is the only answer that works, right? Because have, contribute, and are all plural verbs, right? So you can cross those out and with confidence choose answer choice A, okay? We'll look at one more of these, you guys, yeah, and then we'll call it. So each of these, there's a reason why I chose each of these as examples to present to you guys, because there can be variations. There can be different ways that the SAT can test you on verbs. Right now, it's also true that the SAT can test you on more than one concept in a single question. So the SAT can test you on 2 or sometimes even 3 different grammar concepts, right, within the same question. And this is usually going to be the case for harder difficulty questions, like harder levels of difficulty, where the easy questions might only test you on one concept. Medium and hard level questions might test you on 2, if not 3, right? In these cases, you guys, what's important is for you to focus on just one concept at a time. Okay, based on that, your understanding that the SAT is testing you on this one concept for this particular question, you can now eliminate answer choices because they violate grammar rules, and your grammar rules for that of your understanding of that concept, right? So I'll show you kind of what that means, what that looks like with this example. So step number 1, what do? Take a glance at the answer choices. Do you guys notice the difference between a singular and a plural verb, right? We have as singular, as plural verb, have led, and has as your singular verb, right? Has led. Lead and are leading are also plural verbs. So as soon as you notice that difference between your singular and your plural verb and your answer choices, then you know that one of the things that you're being tested on is going to be subject-verb agreement, right? So your job is to read the sentence and go ahead and find the subject of this verb, right? So the sentence reads, the rising popularity of, notice the preposition, right? What I'll do, you guys, is I'll read the sentence and I'll just kind of think out loud. I'll share what I'm kind of thinking about as I'm reading. This is going to be kind of weird because I'm going to be reading and then I'm going to be telling you what I think out loud as I'm reading. But just know that these are the sort of thoughts and the observations that I'm making as I read a sentence, okay? So it says, oh, the rising popularity. Oh, popularity, that looks like my simple subject of the sentence, right? Of, oh, of is a preposition, so it's gonna create a prepositional phrase, right? Of K-pop, oh, it stops right here. Oh, there's a comma here that's gonna open non-essential information, right? Where does this end? A genre of music that originated in South Korea and combines elements of pop, hip hop, and electronic dance music, among others. Ooh, it ends right over here, right? There's a lot of stuff, right? But it ends right here, and it's going to end right here because why? Because I know this is where the verb begins, right? Have led. When I plug in answer choice A, have led to a global cultural phenomenon that not only attracts a massive following of devoted fans, but also creates opportunities for cross-cultural exchange and appreciation, with many with many international artists collaborating with K-pop groups and incorporating K-pop inspired elements into their own music and performances. So I just want to, the rest of this stuff wasn't important for me to me for this question, but I want to make sure just to read to the end of the sentence to stay consistent with that process, right? Always, when you're reading the sentence the first time through, always read to the end of the sentence, right? Where that period comes in, and just make observations. At this point, what was going on in my mind is this other stuff isn't going to be important for me, because I already found the subject of my sentence, right? So, because I know that the simple subject of the sentence is popularity, right? And popularity is a singular subject. I know that I have to have a singular verb, right? So I know that B has led is the only answer that works, right? Remember, you guys, that the subject of a sentence, right? So what has led to a global phenomenon, right? Oh, the popularity has, right? The popularity of K-pop has, right? Remember that the subject of this verb, right? The subject of a verb can never be found inside of modifiers and non-essential information, right? So as I'm kind of reading and I notice that of K-pop is a prepositional phrase, and then now I have this as non-essential information, I know that anything in here is not going to be the main subject of the sentence, right? Um, so I'm just kind of mentally crossing it out, right? Or just kind of determining where it ends. Also, remember, you guys, when you're going through these questions, do not go backwards from the verb, right? If you look at the noun that comes right before the verb, you have others, right? Which is plural. So you might think that the correct answer has to be a plural verb, but that would be a wrong way to think because others is a part of the non-essential information, right? That begins with a genre and ends with among others, right? Um, and so that's why it's important to just be very systematic, right? Just do things the right way all the time, and you'll be much more consistent with your scores. Okay. Um, I think I have one more question for you guys. Yep, one more question for you guys. And again, this is from my workbook as well. So now, you guys, if you look at the answer choices for this, and this will be the last question for this lesson, it's already an hour and 40 minutes long, which is crazy. But I'm enjoying it. I'm just really speaking from just my heart and just really trying to help you guys out. I really am trying to share with you guys all of the things that I think I notice and that might be helpful for you guys. Um, if you take a look at the answer choices at a glance, right, you can kind of tell you have a difference between a singular and a plural verb, right? Allows is singular, allow is plural, is a plural verb, right? But we also notice this here, and I don't want you to try to figure out all of the things that the SAT is testing you on, right? You don't want to spend too much time like staring at the answer choices when you're taking the test, and trying to figure out what other concepts they're testing you on. It just really helps if you can identify one, right? If you can and start with that one. So as soon as I notice the difference between a singular and a plural verb, I know that subject verb agreement is one of the concepts they're testing me on. Okay. So looking for the subject of the sentence, we have the proliferation. That's my simple subject, right? Because of social media platforms, platforms, right? We know that that's part of the prepositional phrase. So proliferation is a singular subject, right? And I know because it's singular, I can get rid of my plural answer choices. So I can get rid of C and D, right? Allow and allow, yeah, because both of those are plural verbs. So now though, then I gotta figure out, well, hey, well, what's the difference between A and B, right? Well, A uses the verb allows as part of the main verb of the sentence, right? So the proliferation of social media platform allows users to share and consume a wide variety of content, right? So it uses this as the main verb of the sentence, okay? But answer choice B here uses the verb allows as the verb of your dependent clause, right? Which is called a secondary verb. So a secondary verb is like a verb that's used not in the independent clause, but used in like dependent clauses, right? Um, And so now this is going to kind of affect, this is going to deal with sentence structure, right? One of the things that you should know is that when you have questions that test you on verbs, not a lot of times, but sometimes a good portion of the time, they're also testing you on sentence structure as well. And so uh, to not waste too much time, because the main focus of this lesson is on verbs and not sentence structure, I'll just tell you guys why answer choice A is going to be wrong. So the reason why answer choice A is going to be wrong, you guys, is that it creates a sentence structure error, right? I just call this like a nonsensical sentence structure. Okay, and I'll show you guys what I mean. There are different types of sentence structures that are nonsensical. And this specific type is when you have what's called two main verbs, right, that are not properly formed, right? Not properly formed. I'll explain. So this is like me saying, Jack is smart, comma, gets good grades. Okay, this is the example that I used to really illustrate, right, this sentence structure error that's just nonsense. So it's okay to say Jack is smart as one sentence. It's also okay to say Jack gets good grades as another sentence. But it's not okay to say Jack is smart, gets good grades, right? There's nowhere in the English language that this makes sense, right? This is where you have two main verbs, right? Is and gets. That's not properly structured, right? It's not properly formed. Right? You could say Jack is smart and gets good grades, right? But you can't say Jack is smart, comma, gets good grades. Okay, so we have two main verbs that not properly formed or structured, creating this sentence structure that I just call it's ridiculous, it's nonsense, it's nonsensical. Okay, now that's the reason why A is going to be wrong. Well, how do I know this? Well, this is where it helps to read to the end of the sentence, you guys, yeah? To read to the end of the sentence to figure out the correct answer, okay? So when I'm reading, if I plug in answer choice A here, the proliferation of social media platform is my subject, allows is my verb, right? But now I say the proliferation of social media platform allows users to share and consume a wide variety of content ranging from personal updates and photos to news and entertainment, and then has given rise. So can you see how here we have another verb, right? So this is where we have two main verbs, right? Allows and has, right? That's not properly formed. This is like me saying Jack is smart, gets good grades, right? The proliferation of social media platform allows users to do this, has given rise to a cultural phenomenon, is not grammatically correct. Okay? We cannot have a sentence structure where we have two main verbs like this, right? In this sentence, in this way. So this is why A is going to be incorrect. Now, B fixes that problem by creating a non-essential which clause, right? Non-essential information, which is the which relative clause. So if I say now the proliferation of social media platform, this is going to be the subject, right? Now I have non-essential information, right? This which clause. So this verb what allows, right, belongs to the dependent clause, right? This which clause, right? So which allows users to share and consume a wide variety of content ranging from personal updates and photos to news and entertainment. So this relative clause, if you just read it, you can figure out where it ends. You know that this non-essential clause begins with the pronoun, the relative pronoun which, and if you just read it, you know it's going to end at entertainment, right? Plus we have this comma here that comes right before that verb, right? So you know the non-essential information is going to end right here. Okay, so now I only have one main verb, right? Has given rise is my main verb. So I have my main subject, the proliferation of social media platform, and my main verb has given rise, right? And then now I have a grammatical sentence, right? So answer choice B here kind of fixes the sentence structure error that A creates, which is why B would be the correct answer for this question. Okay. All right, you guys, man, it was an hour and 45 minutes long. Hopefully you guys are taking times to pause throughout this video and
Yeah, and kind of take, and take some breaks because it's a lot. I understand and I apologize. But I really hope that's pretty much everything that will be of value for you for when you're dealing with subject verb agreement questions, right? So this, you guys, I gave you guys my best effort, right? Try to give you guys all of the foundational pieces of knowledge that I know, all of the tips and strategies and tools that I use myself and that I've taught to thousands of students and that I've seen the top 1% students, a lot of the top 1% students use, right, to answer these questions right consistently almost always. And hopefully you guys found some value in this. Before you guys leave, make sure to take a moment to reflect and ask yourself, what is one thing that you learned? Right? So that what is one thing new that you learned that you didn't know before, or what is one thing that you learned better, right? That you knew before, but you learned or know better today because of some information in this video. Please let me know. Please share that in the comment section below. It'll help you guys solidify this information in your head better. And it also give me a good sense of what type of information is valuable to most students. Maybe this way, once I kind of collect the data that you guys give me, I'll be able to create more concise or shorter videos that really hit on maybe the maybe just only certain aspects of this concept that'll really help you guys out, right? It'll help other students out in the future. If you also have any questions or are confused about anything, please write that in the comment section below. I'll respond to you in the comments or create a video around it if a lot of students have troubles or if they have the same sort of question or confusion. Also, you guys, please make sure to subscribe and really stay notified. I'm going to try to create a video for you guys every single day. I'm going to upload this. I'm going to upload these videos every single day, and I'm going to probably do this again for free, really consistently for at least the next 6 months or so. Okay, so take advantage of this time. You guys are getting, free quality SAT grammar and reading lessons, right? From someone who kind of who has been where you guys want to get to, and who's also led thousands of students to where you want to go as well. So really take advantage of this. Really utilize me as a resource, and reach out to me, you guys. Yeah, so we can start to form a sort of relationship, even though we may be on other sides of the world. With the beauty of technology, we're able to still, have this relationship where we can interact with each. I can provide you guys with valuable content and feedback and information that'll really help you on your journey. And I guess that's gonna be it, you guys, for this video. Thank you guys for giving me your patience, your and your understanding, right, and your attention. Attention is the single most important asset, and for you guys to offer me your attention means a lot to me. Thank you guys for your time, and thank you guys for your effort. And I appreciate each and every one of you guys, and I really, really am rooting for each of you to succeed. Guys, this is Jin Teacher. Again, remember to always stay curious, always keep learning, and make sure to make this knowledge yours. Take care, you guys. I'll see you soon.